when we turn over to Islam and we look at the origin story of creation and the incident that took place at the very beginning, you'll find that there is this conversation that takes place in between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, right, and the devil. And God is he's deciding to appoint Adam as his successor, his representative, his caliph on the land. He demands and instructs the angels that they have to prostrate to Adam as soon as he blows into Adam of his spirit. Iblis, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, he refuses to prostrate. And so God asks him the most important question, which is, why did you not prostrate? Were you prideful, or were you from the Alaalin? Were you from the Ilion? Were you from the Elohim? Are you from the ones that are the high ones? أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد الأئمة والمهديين وسلم تسليما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear companion and sister Tiffany.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear father.
Thank you for joining me again.
Thank you so much for having me back here.
It's been too long.
It has. Thank you so much. It's an honor.
I think a lot of the viewers have been wondering where you're at, and a lot of people actually, as far as I was told, have written in asking about you. And for those who didn't know, where have you been over this past period?
Oh, I had a baby, so I've just been taking care of my baby.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
God bless you. So today, we're going to start off with a little bit of a heavy topic, a heavy episode to celebrate your return. The topic has to do with monotheism, actually.
Okay.
And it is this apparent contradiction that exists in the Abrahamic religions between monotheism and polytheism, hidden and sewn between the lines in the teachings of the religion. Now, in the apparent, right, the thing that distinguishes the three major Western traditions or religions from many of the other religions on the face of the planet is that it is very adamant about monotheism. Monotheism is the hallmark, it's the trademark, it's the logo, so to speak, of these religions.
Yes.
When people think about Judaism, they think about one God. When they think about Christianity, to a lesser degree, they think of one God because of the concept of the Trinity, right? But Christians themselves consider themselves to be monotheists.
Yes.
And in Islam, it is also, just like Judaism, very concentrated on this aspect of one God. And the most important, perhaps, surah of the Quran is Kullu Allahu Ahad. Allahu Samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad, right? Which is to say that God is one, right? And until the end of the verse, distinguishing this idea that the Almighty God is one in nature. He's not three. He doesn't have a father. He doesn't give birth. He is by himself. You know, it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and the rest of the prophets and the messengers. Versus some of the other religions that exist in the world, like, for example, Hinduism, you know, or some of the other Afro-Brazilian type religions, whether it's Macumba or Voodoo, or these religions that have a pantheon or a group of gods or spirits that are worshipped by, or deities that are worshipped by the followers or the adherents of these religions. But when we look a little bit closer at these religions, one becomes confused a little bit, and things begin to, the whole image of it being strictly monotheistic seemingly begins to fall apart. And more evidence emerges that perhaps these religions were not just only not founded upon monotheism, but they actually might not be monotheistic religions at all, even today.
Okay.
Yeah. And so we'll go, for example, to the easiest example of them all, and that is one that is much spoken about, and that is the concept of there existing this word that's mentioned over 2,000 times in the Bible, which is the word Elohim. Elohim is a Hebrew word, and it basically, it's a plural word. It's not a singular word. And when they come to translate it in the Bible, they usually always translate it as God. But the word itself is a plural word. And the scholars of religion, when they look into the origin of the word, they find that it is a word that would mean the children of El, right? And so there's this God, and he is an ancient Canaanite God, and he has children. His children are called the Elohim, and he himself is called Father of the Gods. That's his title. And his name is El. Oh. And that's why you have these names that are in religion, they're in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, like Mikael, Michael, right? Jibrail, Gabriel,
okay,
right?
Yeah.
So there's always this Il in the end, which is a reference to Il, who is the father of the Elohim.
Wow.
Okay?
That's really interesting. I mean, it's one of those examples of how you have to actually go back to the original language in order to actually understand the meaning. And when you read a translation, it can actually lead you astray. So if the word is translated as God, but it actually has this etymological meaning, then we wouldn't know that unless we look deeply into it.
Yeah. So it's incredible, but it's scary at the same time. And this is actually one of the reasons why a lot of scholars that study religion and study the Bible, they end up disbelieving in God altogether, or disbelieving in these religions, because they say, oh, okay, this is just another made-up religion that is actually polytheistic and this. There are other sources which indicate, and they're actually religious sources in Judaism, ancient ones, and sources that are outside of Judaism that indicate, and the scholars have spoken about, and there's a lot that's written about this that people can research and look into. It's not the topic of the episode, so we'll just briefly go over it to mention, but this idea that Yahweh of the Old Testament used to have a consort or a wife, and that she was the co-God with him, a goddess. So there was two of them, the God Yahweh and his wife, and they were the object of worship in the very beginning. And then throughout time, they ended up with Judaism becoming more and more monotheistic in nature. They end up erasing the identity of the consort wife of Yahweh, and they focused more on the worship of Yahweh himself. And so now what we have is the religion of Judaism starting off, and its start is actually the start of also Christianity and the start of Islam, starting off with this concept that there was a God, but the God had a wife, and the God and his wife also had a bunch of children. Okay? Yeah. Now, follow me through on this.
Okay.
When we turn over to Islam, and we look at the origin story of creation and the incident that took place at the very beginning, also known as the story of Adam and Eve and them being banished from the garden, you'll find that there is this conversation that takes place between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or God, right, and the devil. And God is he's deciding to appoint Adam as his successor, his representative, his caliph on the land. He demands and instructs the angels that they have to prostrate to Adam as soon as he blows into Adam of his spirit. So he's appointing Adam, he's making him a part of him, a representative of him. There's a connection between the two of them. Part of the spirit from God is going to be blown into Adam. And at this moment, all the angels are required to prostrate. Iblis, Satan, the devil, Lucifer, he refuses to prostrate. And so you have this scene where everybody prostrates, he's not prostrating. And so God asks him the most important question, which is, why did you not prostrate? Were you prideful, or were you from the Alaalin? Were you from the Ilion? Were you from the Elohim? Are you from the ones that are the high ones? So now there's a reference in the Quran to a group of people who are the high ones, who are above the very command of God. That when God is commanding everybody, all of creation, including the angels, to prostrate down to Adam, there is this group of people that are high above, that are referred to as the high ones, that they are above the law, they are above the duty, above the command of God, and they're not obliged to listen to God.
Wow.
So God's asking Satan, what's up with you? Were you one of them? Are you one of them? Are you a part of that group? Or are you just prideful? You just think that you are? Or what's the deal?
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, that's huge. That's a huge revelation for people who believe in all three of these religions, because there we have a clue that, as you said, the origin of these three religions, it might not be as monotheistic as we thought.
Exactly. And then you have the theme, Tiffany, that is reoccurring throughout the Bible and throughout the Quran, where God is referring to himself in the plural.
Yeah, I noticed that.
Did we not bring down the rain? Did we not create? We're the ones that do this. We're the ones that spread out the land. We're the ones that bring death. We're the ones that bring life. We're the ones that cause things to grow. We're the ones that cause things to shrivel and die, etc. So it's always in the we. And when you ask the people of religion, why is it that God is referring to himself in the plural, they'll usually say that it's because of the greatness of God, how great God is that he tends to refer to himself in the plural. And I don't know if that's such an acceptable answer in knowing everything that we know and what we just pointed out.
That's fascinating. That's such a great mystery. I mean, the fact that he is referred to as plural in the Quran is something that is present also in the Old Testament, and let us make man in our image. And you find this plural aspect. And I was always wondering why. Why is it always we? Why is it us? What are we really talking about here?
So then we go to the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And we really look into their sayings, their narrations, their supplications, to try to understand and see what is up with this. Can we find any sort of meaning for this? And we find something that's even weirder that takes place. Something that goes against our very instinct as Muslims, Christians, or Jews, right?
Okay.
Because remember, now we're coming into conflict with all of these ideas and stories in our head. When we think of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we think of him entering into the Kaaba and bashing all of the other idols, and telling people there's only one God, and telling people that the greatest sin that one can ever make is to be a mushrik, somebody who associates something else with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a polytheist. God can forgive murder, he can forgive adultery, he can forgive rape, he can forgive any horrible crime, even if your crimes reach up to the heavens, but he can't forgive this thing of associating something with God, being a polytheist. But yet this is where we find ourselves investigating.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we find that the origin of religion is from. And we have also Abraham, and we think of Abraham. And Abraham, that was his whole mission. He was disgusted by this idea that people would worship other gods. This multiplicity of gods was one that he rejected.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there can't be any other God but Allah.
Yeah, it's confusing.
Right?
Yeah.
But when we go into the narrations of Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, we find that there are actually some supplications. For example, in one narration, somebody asks one of the imams to teach him a special supplication. And he tells him to basically go into prostration and to say the following. And then a supplication is narrated, it's written in the books. And it says, for the Shia or the individual who is asking to say, O Lord of Lords, O King of Kings, O God of Gods.
Okay.
And so then that opened up a gigantic discussion between the scholars and the followers of the religion of Islam for the centuries to come.
Okay.
Some scholars would say, what does this mean? If Muhammad and the family of Muhammad are saying to say that God is the Lord of Lords, then that wouldn't be an appropriate thing to say unless there actually were other lords other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Right.
There must be other kings other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There must be other gods then other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so they took each section of the dua and they began to discuss it. And they said, well, in terms of the kings, this could refer to earthly kings. So God is the king above all earthly kings. That we can accept, and that is not in contradiction with monotheism.
Yeah.
Lord of Lords, okay, well, in the Quran, Joseph refers to the Pharaoh that raised him, the father of Akhenaten, as being his Lord.
Okay.
He said, my Lord did good to me, all right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, if we're going to think of it that way, and if we're also going to use in the Arabic language the word Rabb to refer to Rabb al-Usra, and not just a God or the Lord of the family, all right? Instead of being a word that refers exclusively to God, or Rabb al-Amal, because these are words, right? In the dua, it says Rabb al-Arbab, which would translate to a Lord of Lords. But you also have in Arabic Rabb al-Amal, which refers to Lord of the work, which would mean what? Your boss, essentially,
yes.
right? In your work, the employer. You have Rabb al-Usra, which means the head of the family, right? Which refers to the father. So in the Arabic language, using the word Rabb would be okay then, because it is known and it's understood that it's not referring to God, but it's referring to somebody who is an authority figure, either in work or in the family or in some sort of social setting with other human beings, right?
Yeah, okay. Makes sense.
Okay, so it makes sense. So being the Lord of Lords might mean just being like, he's the ultimate father, he's the ultimate boss, he's the ultimate authority out of all the people on the earth that have roles of authority. Yeah. But when we come to the word Ilah al-Aliha, the God of gods, this is a different story. You cannot find anybody in any earthly position at all that is referred to as an ilah or a God. You only have Allah, the God, right? Or al-ilah, the God, or ilah, God, to refer to the one God of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, to refer to the Father up above, the God that sent the prophets and the messengers, etc. But in this supplication, it's saying that we should say the God of gods. So who are the gods that have above them a higher God or a higher being? This is the great mystery.
I mean, that's a huge question. And this is very unnerving supplication if you think about it, because it calls into question all of these belief systems. Yeah, I would like to know the answer.
Yeah, it does call into question all of these belief systems, and it's quite problematic, especially when the religion of Islam, on the one hand, was so offended and adamant about removing the title of God from somebody like Jesus Christ. So who could these gods be? You have to understand that in the religion of Islam, especially in Shia Islam, right? So let's leave Sunni Islam for a moment, because Sunni Islam is not like Shia Islam. In Shia Islam, it is more like Catholicism than it is the Protestant faith. There are saints, there are intercessors, there are beings that have reached high stations that serve as kind of doors between us and the ultimate God. And they have godlike power and authorities. And the beings that are at the highest station in Shia Islam that have wilaya takwiniya, or the authority over the universe according to the traditions, they have superior knowledge, they have the ability to say to a thing, be and it is. They have this kind of ultimate control, is Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, is specifically the Ahl Kisa, or the people of the cloak, or the people of the cloak, and the 9 individuals that come after Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, that make the 14 infallibles in total, which is Muhammad, Fatima, and the 12 Imams, right?
Yes.
These individuals have specifically stated in narrations from the Ahl Bayt alayhi salam, say about us whatever it is that you want to say, but make us creatures, make us creations. Don't exaggerate in your speech about us. And these specific individuals are stated in the narrations to be the closest beings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is nobody else that could be referred to as gods except for them, right? Because there's nobody that's actually higher than them except for the one and only God. That much is very clear in the narrations. For example, you have one narration where the Prophet Muhammad says to Imam Ali that nobody knows God except for me and you, Ali. And nobody knows me except for you and God, and nobody knows you except for me and God. And so you have it basically like crunched in or limited to these individuals as candidates for who would be referred to as gods.
Yeah.
So we went to some of the other mystical texts that are in Islam, and we found something quite interesting. We found the book al-Kitab, which is a very Gnostic, Ismaili sourced, right, text, although not limited to the Ismaili sect. And it contains in there a series of mystical conversations that take place between the 5th Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, al-Baqir, which is the revealer of knowledge, and he was the 5th out of the 12 Imams, and between one of his closest companions, and that was Jabir al-Jafi, right? And in that conversation that's taking place in Kitab, which is stated that it has to be extremely safeguarded, that this type of knowledge is not to be given to the common people, at least at that time, that this type of knowledge is not going to be understood by them, and that it's extremely dangerous, right? Because of the implications concerning it. It tells the story about how in the beginning of creation, there was this high king. He's referred to as the high king. Remember, just like El, all right, or Il, who was the father of the gods, all right, or the king of kings, or the lord of lords. You have this character in the book, who is called the High King. He's specifically referenced as that. He's not referenced as Allah.
Okay.
Actually, in the manuscript, it is explained that the word Allah, the God, is referring to somebody else other than the High King.
Wow.
That the word Allah is actually referring to 5 individuals. And those are those initial 5 lights that were created in the image of the High King and created by the High King, right? Or the offspring of the High King. And that is Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Al-Hassan, and Al-Hussein, alayhim salam.
Okay, the people of the cloak.
The people of the cloak. They're the ones that are referred to as Allah or the God. And it is not, the God is not referring to the High King. The High King is this power that is above even them.
That's mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing.
I just have to take a second for that to sink in. We have the High King, and then we have Allah, which is actually a 5-part copy of the High King. Mm-hmm. And that's really something. That's really amazing.
So then it goes on to explain that there was this angel who was called Azazel. And Azazel was existing at that time, and he was tested. And the High King is the one who addresses Azazel, according to this narration, and tells him that he's decided that he's going to appoint somebody in the land. He's going to make a caliph in the land.
Just like the Quranic narrative.
Just like the Quran said. And the High King tells Azazel to prostrate to Adam. He refuses to prostrate to Adam. And then he's asked, why is it that you didn't prostrate? And so the group that it would concern, that are the high ones, that are exempt from this act of prostration, that Iblis was forced to be a part of, or to be a part of this test, those high ones, or the Alaalin that are referred to, are referring to Allah, which is Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Al-Hassan, and Al-Hussein. The script also states that Iblis struggled with the concept of monotheism itself, and that when he said the words قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, right? He was referring to that these words were the words of Iblis. So when the implication in the narration is that God tells him to prostrate to Adam, he refuses to, and he says, say God is one, right? So he's trying to say, well, I'm not going to be a polytheist. This is not my God. I only prostrate to God. But when he said, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, what was meant by Allah, or say that God or Allah is one, he was referring to the unity of those 5 lights, which are Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, Al-Hassan, and Al-Hussein. But he himself, inside of himself, still had doubts concerning that, was not so convinced about that, but that the statement, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, the word Allah, was a reference to those 5 lights that were initially one light, that was the creation of the being that was called the High King in the manuscript al-Kitab.
That's fascinating. And that adds a whole new layer into the story of Iblis and what he struggled with. And there was always this question of how can somebody who had reached such a high station then doubt in God? And it wasn't just about Adam, but it was also about Allah. Wow.
So now when we take what's written in the manuscript and we match it with everything else that we've spoken about, it's all going together. It's all clicking now, like a puzzle that the pieces begin to come together. yes, you have this ultimate God. Yes, you have this Father God that's above. And the Father God, or the High King, is the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. He's the God of gods. There are other divine beings or lords or kings or gods that are exempted from worshiping or submitting themselves to Adam. And those ones are high ones. They're high above the law. They are the Alaalin. They are Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. They are a group of beings that came in the very beginning that are gods over creation, but they're not the ultimate God, and they still are created. Okay, so now everything's beginning to click together, and the plurality that existed in the Quran and in the Bible, it's no longer an issue, especially when we look at some other narrations that indicate and explain the plurality in the Quran when it says that verily we're the ones who bring down the remembrance, verily we're the ones who do such and such, as being a God and Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. Yes. So now the entire thing makes sense and it clicks, and Muhammad and the family of Muhammad have this title, and the title is that of being gods.
Wow.
But they're still not the ultimate God.
Yes.
And it's a secret, because if Muhammad had come at the time that he came and he bashes down all of the idols of the different tribes and the different peoples, and he tells them that they have to worship his God, the high God, that would be one thing. And that's already a difficult task. But imagine him trying to explain to them that he also is a sub-God or a lower God or a created God. They would never have understood it. And so it became this safeguarded secret that was passed down from one individual to another. And it was something that was shared between the imams and their companions, right? Mm-hmm. Their close companions. And when we actually look into the history of the imams with their companions, we will find that with almost every single imam, there takes place these fitnas, all right, where there are individuals, according to the narrations, that end up pointing out the divinity of the imam, right, and saying that this imam is God, and the imam ends up rejecting this claim or cursing them in public, or there's an act of taqiyya that takes place at the time. And you have people like Abu al-Khattab, for example, that ended up declaring the divinity of Imam صادق alayhi salam, and then he led a group of people, and they were all killed and crucified as they engaged in an uprising in order to put Imam صادق alayhi salam on the throne. And Imam صادق alayhi salam curses them to the normal people, but there are also these other narrations that state that Abu al-Khattab was not cursed, and that actually he was Gabriel, right, the archangel in human form, and that he led 70 prophets and messengers with him. These Shia, they were the reincarnation of 70 prophets and messengers, and they all got crucified with him. And they were all prophets and messengers because they all recognized and reached the level where they knew God. And that means that they knew the reality of the Imam. They knew the reality of Imam صادق alayhi salam and identified him as God. The same thing happens with some narrations that have to do with Jabir and Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, where basically essentially the same thing happens, and Jabir recognizes the divinity of Muhammad al-Baqir. You have characters like Abdullah ibn Saba in Islam that was burnt and cursed and remains to be a vilified character because he recognized the divinity of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, and Imam Ali alayhi salam rejected it. And so the Muslims became broken down into these different groups. A group of Muslims ended up becoming what they would call ghulatis or exaggerators, people that ended up worshiping the imams exactly as the Christians worship Jesus, identifying this imam, usually especially Imam Ali alayhi salam, as being the ultimate God, and that the other imams are other embodiments of Imam Ali alayhi salam, and that they worship him and they claim that the worship of Imam Ali alayhi salam is the final destination, and that you cannot finish reincarnating or stop reincarnating on earth until you identify him as that. You have other Muslims that say that this is complete shirk against Islam, against everything that the Prophet Muhammad taught, that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in narrations, that I would tell you about the traits of Imam Ali alayhi salam and speak about them if I wasn't afraid that you would worship him. So he was afraid that the people would worship Imam Ali as they worship Jesus, thereby leading the Muslims once again into polytheism and going astray. And so you have this confusion that occurs between the ghulat, or the exaggerators, and the shortcomers, or the muqassirin in the narrations that recognize that the imam is the imam, but they fall short of giving the imam all the props or all the recognition that he deserves, or being able to give him his rights by properly recognizing and identifying his full nature.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, it all fits together, and it explains all of these strange instances in the history of Islam where groups split apart and, worshipped one of the infallibles. It makes sense.
And then you have strange narrations, mystical ones that appear in manuscripts, and people often, not so often, because they're very hard. A lot of these manuscripts, they still have not been translated into other languages, but they exist out there. And some of these manuscripts, they're very basically guarded. They're still held tight by groups of Asian people or Shia that live in particular countries, that they don't really, take these books and print them. They're handwritten and preserved from the one generation to another, and they're secrets that are given and passed on from, adherent to adherent. And so every now and then you'll find certain people that will post on the internet, or they'll share narrations that they have found from a particular manuscript or that they've copied on. And you'll find narrations, the likes of, for example, this narration that you have of Jabir al-Jafi. And it says that one day he was walking by and he saw this man. He looked like an Arab Bedouin who was standing at a distance. And he was at the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. All of a sudden, as he was looking at him, a comet flies by, and the implication is that the comet took him and went.
Okay.
And then Jabir thought that it was a quite disturbing scene. He'd never seen anything like that. And so he goes back to Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, and he asks him about this individual. And the Imam says that individual was the God of the 8th universe. He was the God of the 8th universe, and he had come here to visit al-Hussein alayhi salam, or visit the grave of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. So that narration opens up a whole other can of worms, so to speak. And you have now this concept that there are other gods, even other than Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And that the word God is associated with the having his own universe that he controls.
Wow.
Right? Because here's a God that was visiting Imam al-Hussein in that universe that they were in, right? Our universe, but he actually came from the 8th universe to this universe to make a ziyarah. So actually he's under the God, right, or gods of our universe, which are Muhammad and the family of Muhammad. And he was coming to pay his respect, but he also is the God that's worshipped and in charge of his own universe in another place.
I mean, that's really shocking. That's really shocking.
It is really shocking, but it kind of also makes sense when you dig and look into the narrations. You'll find that there are narrations that state that the gods that were worshipped, for example, in the Quran by the people of Noah, Ya'uq and these ones, and other narrations that state that Allati wal-Uzza and these pre-Islamic pagan gods, they state that these idols, although they are idols, and although the idols that the people are worshiping are without power, and although the act of worshiping of these idols, right, that are made from sticks and stones and sometimes made from dates, is a blatant act of polytheism, right, that would lead the person into hellfire, that the origin of these gods, the narration states, come from real individuals that existed in the time of Noah, or in the time before the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that they were righteous individuals who were good companions that did good things for their people, and after the passing of the Prophet, and they were saints, so to speak, and some of them performed miracles, and then after their death, the people wanted to honor them, and so they built statues of them,
yes,
so that the people would remember them. And then after several generations of people coming to visit the statues to honor them, the stories became embellished to the point that they were raised up to the rank of gods, and they were worshipped as the God, other than or in association with, at an equal rank of the God or the high king, the God of gods or the king of kings. And that's important. Why? Because that means that these gods, they have an origin. So Odin would have been a righteous man, a prophet, right? He wouldn't just be a Norse god, right? The same thing with Thor. The same thing you find with Osiris, that the narrations identify, many scholars identify Osiris as Idris of Islam, or Enoch, right?
Yes.
And you have the same thing for Zeus, or some of these other gods that existed. Their origin was actually unknown prophets and messengers or saints, individuals that were close to God, but they also were Hujjaz, or proofs over their people. And later on, people ended up raising them to the rank as being the ultimate God.
Yeah.
So they could have been raised to be at the rank of the ultimate God, or perhaps something else happened. And this is the proposition of the proposal that's kind of, or the theory that's hidden beneath the lines that exists, the thing that somebody has to really put on their eyeglasses and kind of contemplate over. Okay. Because you have these narrations that state, for example, one narration states that God says, obey me, he says to his servant, my servant, obey me and you'll be like me. I say to a thing, be and it is. I'll make you say to a thing, be and it shall be.
Yeah.
Another narration says that God says to his servant, love me, and I will make you like me. And there's nothing like me. Well, that's odd. Because everything that is created has a likeness. Everything that is created has a likeness, right?
Yeah.
Everything that's a creature has a likeness. I mean, we are like the other people. The animals are like other animals. human beings are like the animals in the sense that they eat and they drink and they have bodies and they have hands like monkeys or whatever. So everything is similar to something. The only thing that is above being similar to something is a God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Is God.
Yeah.
God is above all of his subjects, all of his creatures. God is above the entire universe of creation.
Yeah.
So perhaps what is meant in the narration, I mean, it's the only really apparent meaning to it, is that God is saying, love me, obey me, and I will make you like me. If you obey me and love me enough and follow in my footsteps, one day I will take you and I will give you your own universe, and you will be the God of that universe. You will be like me. You will say to a thing, be and it is.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. Wow. I mean, that's a meaning to that narration that would have never crossed my mind.
So now you have what? Now you have the journey of the seeker, the student, the disciple, the believer, the Shia, going from one where he has to find his Lord, recognize his Lord, emulate his Lord, be a good slave to his Lord, all because his Lord wants to free him at some point and make him like him and grant him, as now an adult, a fully developed spiritual being. He will give him the next stage, right? The next thing, he will give him what he gave himself: kingship, authority, lordship, godhood over a particular universe, and a universe which is probably of his own construct and of his own creation. That's why we have narrations, and even Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, he spoke about how Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, there are worlds that are out there that they are, or some of the prophets and the messengers are, rulers over, or universes or worlds or planets that they created, or creatures or creations that they created. And I kind of left some of this in the book, The Goal of the Wise. People can read about it. And yeah, so it's an interesting secret that's hidden in there, and that ultimately, as Imam Ahmad al-Hassan taught in the book of monotheism, and as he said to me directly, he said that the thing about it is, though, that all of the Ahl al-Bayt alayhim salam, whether it's Muhammad, Ali, Fatima, al-Hassan, al-Hussein, whether it's the God of the eighth universe, whether it's somebody who reaches the rank of godhood as explained in the book of monotheism that's written by Imam Ahmad al-Hassan, all of these individuals, they still have a God that is over them. They still have a creator that's over them. And that in the end of the day, even though there does exist many quote unquote gods, in reality, there is only one true God, the High King, the ultimate God, the one who is referred to as Huwa, the one who's referred to as He, the one who nobody knows Him and there's nothing that's like Him, and that created Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the perfect representative, or the perfect reflection of Him in the world of creation, in order that He may be known by proxy, and that as you grow in knowing of God, there has to come a point where you go from, being the ultimate generous person, the ultimate, benevolent person, to the ultimate creator. and the ultimate one who sees and hears. And to carry out some of these functions, to be the creator and reflect that name from God, you have to be delegated the universe or act in a simulation or in a physical reality as God acts over all creatures, because that's the whole next level of understanding and coming close to and knowing how God is, because now you're actually fulfilling the role of God amongst creatures, and you're able to know his wisdom even more so and be closer to him than even before.
That's fascinating. I think that this is such a deep topic, and I really understand why monotheism throughout time has been simplified and simplified, because it's actually such a vast topic, and in order to really understand it, you have to understand the true meaning of it. And the intellect of the people was not always, ready to receive that information. But I just want to say thank you for taking me on this journey of exploring the true meaning of monotheism and the implications of that. And I just really appreciate everything that you've taught me today.
Oh, God bless you, Tiffany. And I appreciate you being here on this episode with me and coming back after your birth. And I appreciate all the other episodes, and I think everybody's missed you, and we look forward to having you in many more episodes to come. And congratulations on the birth of your beautiful baby girl, Genesis.
Thank you so much, Father.
God bless you. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. Wow. I feel like my mind has been opened in so many ways by today's episode, and I hope that you learned as much as I did. And it makes sense, when you think about it. The narrations state that God created the creation so that they may know him. And the only way that you can truly know something is if you become like that thing, if you dissolve into that thing. And there are many examples. I mean, a practical example that we can think about is like a child. A child cannot understand their parents until they themselves become parents. And then they walk in their shoes, and then they can truly understand. And it is no different with God. There's just so much to think about from today's episode. I feel like I'm one step closer to understanding truly what monotheism is. And I hope that you will continue to join us on this journey, on this channel, and continue to learn with us. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you're not already subscribed to our channel, make sure that you click the subscribe button so that you can get notifications about new videos, and make sure that you tune in to the community posts, because if you don't already know, the Qa'im Abu Sadiq is writing those posts himself. And make sure that you subscribe to our membership-only platform, because there's exclusive content only for members of the channel. And make sure that you continue this journey with us.